This podcast explores the workings of the criminal justice system, including the investigation and prosecution of serious offences involving sexual and physical violence. Episodes may contain detailed and sometimes graphic accounts drawn directly from case files, witness testimony and court proceedings, including those involving adult and child victims. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Criminal Justice in Action. I'm Dr. Candida Saunders, and this is episode 5 of season 1, Rape on Trial. If you're a new listener, hi, welcome. I'm delighted you're here, but I'd recommend you go back to episode 1 at some point, if not now. This isn't really a dip in and out kind of podcast. The themes, issues and arguments raised this season, they emerge and develop over multiple episodes. In terms of where we are right now, we're 2 trials into what's either the beginnings of a pattern or me stumbling by pure chance into a couple of rape trials that, by luck rather than judgment, beat the odds, bucked the system's trends, dodged the rape myths, misogyny and stereotypes that we're repeatedly told about, and not only made it to trial, but also resulted in convictions. So we're testing that. Are Tariq and Jerome's trials rare, inexplicable cases that I've happened upon by chance, or are they glimpses of a broader pattern? Do the 2 trials we've seen so far simply show us that the criminal process can work in rape and serious sexual offence cases? Or do they shed light on how the criminal process actually works in these cases? Are they more typical than we perhaps think? To explore those questions, and they are crucially important questions, we're heading back to court. We're going to watch another rape trial, another case that, according to the conventional wisdom, involves the wrong kind of rape and the wrong kind of victim. Another trial that, on the mainstream's dismal account of rape in the criminal justice system, shouldn't succeed. Pattern or fluke? Before we begin, a couple of things. First, the trial we're about to watch, Dean's trial, involves intimate partner violence. And I suspect that the way this trial plays out, well, without giving too much away, it doesn't look like Tariq's trial. It doesn't look like Jerome's trial. I suspect that in some respects, Dean's trial will align more closely with how you imagine rape trials look, given what we're told about them. But in other respects, I think certain elements of this trial are likely to be unexpected, unanticipated, at least to non-lawyers and more specifically to non-advocates. I want to show you everything that happens in Dean's trial, the perhaps expected and the maybe unexpected. So I'm going to be covering these proceedings in even more depth, even more detail, which means it's going to be a 3-episode trial, not the usual 2-parter that we've done up until now. That closer look, though, that deep dive, that means I want to gently remind you of the content warning at the top of this episode. We're watching an intimate partner rape trial in detail. Listener discretion is advised. The second thing I want to mention, don't forget, and for new listeners, please be aware that, for legal and ethical reasons, everyone and everywhere in the trials and cases discussed this season are anonymised. All the names you'll hear are pseudonyms: complainants, witnesses, counsel, even the judge. I strip out dates and places too. I don't even identify the relevant court's location. A Crown Court somewhere in England and Wales is as specific as I'll get. Sometimes I'll alter non-material facts and details to help protect anonymity. For example, if someone was pelted with Swarovski crystals, I'd probably say they were pelted with pebbles. The essence is the same, but if the press covered the case, you're less likely to be able to make the link. What I don't change are the substantive events of the trial itself, the legal submissions, the judge's rulings, the evidence and arguments presented and directions given to the jury. They're edited for time, of course, but the core of what happened, the what, when, why and how, the conduct and outcome of proceedings, that remains accurate and unchanged. I make this point because a friend of mine who listens to the podcast asked me about it a few days ago. So I think it's worth taking a moment now to make clear that the aim of anonymisation is to prevent you from finding the case and identifying any of the various individuals, especially complainants. The people involved in these proceedings will recognise the case, and that's as it should be. I'm not trying to make a case unrecognisable to its participants. I'm trying to make it undiscoverable and in the process protect the anonymity of all the parties. That the defendant's identity is also protected is a perhaps unfortunate but absolutely necessary consequence of that. So with those caveats in place, let me take you to Court 2, a large and virtually empty courtroom in a Crown Court somewhere in England and Wales. It's a bright but chilly Monday morning. We're here for a trial that's listed to start today at 10 a.m. The case involves a single defendant, let's call him Dean, and as usual, all we know right now is that this is a rape trial. We take our seats in the public gallery a few minutes before 10 and proceedings are already underway. Not the main hearing, the trial proper as it were. What's happening now are those final pre-trial matters that need to be dealt with before the jury's impanelled and the trial itself gets started. Counsel, the barristers representing the prosecution and the defence, are in discussions with the judge. To our left, as we're facing the court, is defence counsel, Mr. Charles. He's obviously got his back to us and is facing the judge. To our right, and sitting closest to the jury box, is prosecuting counsel, Mr. Peters. Sitting in front and below the judge's raised bench is the court clerk. He's facing into the court. And in addition to these four individuals, the judge, the two barristers acting for the prosecution and the defence and the clerk, there's us, well, me, and the defendant, Dean. Dean's a young man, mid-20s maybe. He's wearing a smart shirt, clean, tidy. He's sitting in the dock at the back of the court, accompanied by a noticeably burly custody officer. As we eavesdrop on the discussion that's taking place between counsel and the judge right now, we start to get a clearer picture of the case. Dean's about to be tried on multiple counts, so a number of separate charges, sexual and physical violence against two complainants, Anya and Erica, both of whom it seems are ex-girlfriends of Dean. Dean's charged with 1 count of rape, 1 count of sexual assault, and 3 counts of actual bodily harm, all against Anya. There are also a number of counts relating to Erica. These include actual bodily harm, so ABH, witness intimidation, and harassment. So we've got 2 complainants and multiple charges. Prosecuting counsel, Mr. Peters, is telling the judge about some last-minute changes and how the trial will now proceed. And the biggest change is that this morning, Dean's decided to change his plea on some, but not all, counts on the indictment. Specifically, Dean will now plead guilty to the 3 counts of ABH relating to Anya and all the counts relating to Erica. Although there's still some ongoing debate between the prosecution and defence regarding the agreed facts on some of these charges, says Mr. Peters, particularly in relation to the strangulation and suffocation of the women, he informs the judge that the pleas are acceptable to the Crown. This, says Mr. Peters, leaves 2 counts on the indictment, the 2 sexual offences, which the Crown, in other words the prosecution, is proceeding with. Trial then is going ahead, but it's now a 2 counts, 1 complainant trial. In other words, Dean's guilty pleas have just removed all the violent offences from the indictment and effectively reduced this to a one person's word against another's sex offence trial. The clerk puts the agreed charges to Dean, who pleads guilty to each one from the dock. A quick shuffle of papers and discussions between prosecuting counsel and the judge resume. A new indictment will need to be drawn up, says Mr. Peters, containing just the 2 remaining charges. The jury bundles, a folder containing all the relevant documents for jurors, will also need to be reduced, he says. There's some relevant bad character evidence, continues Mr. Peters, that might be agreed between the parties. The judge confirms he's happy for them to continue to discuss this. Mr. Peters explains to the judge that defence counsel, let's call him Mr. Charles, Dean's defence barrister, has only recently been instructed in the case and he's going to need some time with his client before the trial begins. The prosecutor also informs the judge that the defence hasn't yet submitted a defence statement, but, says Mr. Peters, he can give the court an idea of the defence position now. It's a total denial, he says. The defence position is that following the assaults to which Dean's now pleaded guilty, Anya made, quote, gratuitous and malicious allegations of sexual assault. This simply didn't happen. The defence is denying them in their totality. The plan for the rest of the day is now agreed. The judge tells counsel that court will rise now, which basically just means the judge is going to leave the courtroom and go back to his chambers/office. Court will rise now so that the prosecution can revise the indictment and deal with the jury trial bundles, and so that Mr. Charles has some time to take instructions from Dean. At 12, says the judge, the jury will be impanelled and the prosecution will open before court breaks for a late lunch. Prosecution evidence will start at 2:30, with Anya's pre-recorded evidence in chief, followed immediately by cross-examination conducted via video link. This is the standard direction in cases like this: a video of the complainant's police interview played as evidence in chief, followed by remote cross-examination via video link, which means Anya won't need to step foot in court at all. She'll be in a video suite in another court in another city, answering questions live over the link. With the plan for the rest of the day agreed, court rises. Jury selection begins at 12:15. By 1 o'clock, 12 jurors have been selected and sworn in. Once everyone's still and silent, the judge begins his opening remarks and directions for the freshly empanelled jury who, at this point in the trial, are usually looking around the court in an apparent state of awe and bemusement. He starts by telling the jury the difference between his role and theirs. My role is matters of law, he says, and to sum the case up at the end of trial. That's so you don't have to keep a note of all the evidence. It's your role, he continues, to evaluate the evidence, and the best way of doing that is by looking and listening. He explains that it's the jury's role to decide the facts, and that decision is for the 12 of them and the 12 of them alone. For that reason, he tells them, they must keep all the details of the case to themselves until they've reached a verdict. Your decisions, he says, must be based solely on the evidence, the legal directions I give you, and submissions from counsel. They're not to speak to anyone else, they're not to do any research of their own, and he tells them it's a criminal offence to do so. They're only to work on the case when they're all together, and only once they've received all the evidence, directions and submissions. He pauses briefly. You'll have worked out this is a sex case, he says. When hearing a case like this, you need to keep a cool head. The judge explains that such cases can be emotional and distressing, but, he tells the jury, emotions won't help you in deciding whether the allegations are satisfactorily proved. They must, he says, take a clinical approach when considering the evidence. It's at this point the judge explicitly and directly raises the spectre of rape myths and misconceptions, confronting the biases that can shape how evidence is received and assessed by jurors. It is understandable, he says, if you come to trial with assumptions as to who may be a victim of sexual offences, who may commit them, what someone who's been assaulted may say or do. You might have read media coverage about whether those making these sorts of allegations tell the truth or tell lies. You must leave behind such assumptions. Experience tells the court there's no stereotype regarding who commits or who experiences sexual assault. It can happen in almost any circumstances between all kinds of different people who react in all sorts of different ways. You must approach the case dispassionately, he tells them, putting aside any views as to what you might or might not expect to hear, and make your decision only on the evidence presented. Fundamentally, he says, you must decide if you're sure events occurred in the way described by the complainant. It is only if you are sure that she's an honest and reliable witness that you can convict the defendant of the counts you're considering. You will need to assess the witness's evidence, he says, and that assessment is for U12 and U12 alone. Next, he tells the jury how some of the evidence they'll hear during this trial is going to be adduced. In this trial, he says, and like almost every other trial heard today, quite frankly, you'll see that special measures are employed. The complainant's evidence will come to you via video link, and even before that, you'll see an ABE video. ABE is short for Achieving Best Evidence, he tells them, and an ABE video is a pre-recorded video of the witness's interview with a specially trained officer taken at the time. After they've watched this video, he continues, the complainant's evidence will come via video link. Importantly, says the judge, the witness can be asked questions by counsel for the Crown and the defence, so her evidence can be tested in the normal way. It's not just the complainant's evidence that's subject to special measures in this case, says the judge. The jury will be hearing from a police officer who can't come to court, so he'll also be giving evidence via video link. You assess the evidence given via special measures in the normal way, he tells the jury. We have these measures to make witnesses feel as comfortable as possible in order to assist you in your task of assessing their evidence, he explains. What you must do is understand that these measures don't reflect adversely on the defendant. Special measures are used routinely in these cases, he says. They don't reflect on him at all. Finally, the judge points out that the defendant's sitting in the dock at the back of the court. That's just how we do it in the UK, he says. It doesn't mean anything that he's in the dock. It doesn't impact on his evidence. It's now 1:23 p.m. We'll rise for lunch. Be back for 2:30. It's 2:35 when we're allowed back into court too. The judge and counsel are already there, and as we take our seats, we catch the tail end of an ongoing discussion about the prosecution's application to adduce evidence of Dean's bad character. This is a legal matter, so the jury isn't here, and the fact that the prosecution is forewarning the court that time will need to be factored into proceedings to hear the application suggests that Mr. Charles is going to be opposing it. In other words, Mr. Peters' hopes earlier this morning that admissibility might be agreed with the defence didn't pan out. The judge is saying that originally this was two separate cases against Dean. He was being prosecuted on charges relating to Anya, and in a separate case he was being prosecuted on the charges relating to Erica. These two cases were then joined, in other words they were brought together, combined into a single trial, joined on the indictment. Given this background, Dean's guilty pleas this morning, and the absence of a defence statement until today, the judge wants a written application from the prosecution. Mr. Peters looks a little disappointed. The judge assures him that sufficient time to hear that application will be factored in. The jury's then called in, and the prosecution opens its case. It's 2:45. Mr. Peters introduces himself to the jury and explains that he's prosecuting the case on behalf of the Crown. He directs the jury to the bundles in front of them, and specifically to the indictment. The defendant is being tried on 2 counts, he says, 1 count of sexual assault and 1 count of rape, oral rape. Mr. Peters tells the jury that Anya, the complainant in the case, and Dean are ex-partners, and that they will hear evidence that this was a controlling and coercive, abusive relationship. That there were expressions of violence by Dean towards her arising out of jealous rage causing him to give Anya a good beating on the night of the first incident, the sexual assault in count 1. The pair's relationship started about 3 years ago, the jury are told, and it didn't take long for things to start going badly. It was only a couple of months in when Anya, who isn't a British national, wanted to go home for a wedding. Dean didn't want her to go, so, no doubt a mark of his control, says Mr. Peters, Dean seized her passport and ripped it up. Dean subsequently relented, however, and took Anya to the relevant embassy so she could get a temporary passport. Anya then flew home for the wedding, and while she was away, she decided she wasn't coming back. She decided to stay away from Dean and end the relationship. But he's not having that, says Mr. Peters. He sent her messages, angry, threatening messages, and she decided it was safer to return to the UK. Now back in England, Anya went to pick Dean up from somewhere in the car. We're not told where, just, quote, somewhere. When Dean got into the car, he immediately became abusive. He was jealous about what she'd got up to while she was abroad at the family wedding. He assaulted Anya, who sustained injuries amounting to actual bodily harm. Anya eventually managed to get out of the car and fled into a petrol station, beaten, crying, and asking the staff for help. She rang Dean's father, and his wife, Dean's stepmother, drove to collect Anya from the petrol station. Anya stayed at a friend's house that night. Dean was charged with offences relating to this incident, says Mr. Peters, and he's pleaded guilty to those this morning. Amazingly, says the prosecutor, Anya got back with Dean the following day. They spent Christmas together and went away for a few days' holiday. Very quickly, however, Dean's jealousy started up again. This time, the focus of his rage was that she'd spent a night with her friend, a male friend, after that first significant beating. Dean couldn't let that go. He flew into a rage and gave Anya another good beating, broke her nose, broke her tooth, blacked her eyes. As a result of this incident, says Mr. Peters, Dean was charged with ABH, and this morning he pleaded guilty to that. In terms of Anya's veracity, Mr. Peters says, her truthfulness, you can be sure she's told the truth because he's pleaded guilty. Although, he continues, you might think he didn't have much choice about that, given the injuries she'd sustained. Mr. Peters then directs the jury to a series of photographs in their bundles documenting Anya's injuries from the two violent assaults he's just described. We can't see those pictures, by the way, they're not up on the court screen. The prosecutor gives the jury a few moments to take those photos in before resuming his opening speech. That beating wasn't enough for Dean, he tells the jury. He wasn't satisfied by having inflicted that upon her. He told her to go upstairs and undress. Anya did as she was told, not surprisingly, as she'd just been severely beaten. He told her to undress and to get on all fours. He then inflicted the first of the sexual assaults on her, an act of sexual violence intended to punish. He beat her again and told her he was going to rape her. He kicked her and she saw stars. She seems to have passed out. When she came around, Anya tried to sweet-talk him, to placate him. The next morning, as soon as she woke up, Dean started up again, asking why she'd cheated on him, telling her she had no respect and that she was a liar. Dean then gave her another punishment, oral rape. He stuck his erect penis into Anya's mouth, says Mr. Peters, hard, telling her to take it all, calling her a slag. The oral rape ended when she vomited on the floor. This annoyed Dean, says Mr. Peters. He told Anya to get dressed, then took her out in the car. He drove her to family and friends' houses, showing them her injuries. An act of humiliation. Dean invited one friend to have a go at her too if he wanted, but the friend declined. During this journey, Dean gave Anya access to her mobile phone. She messaged a friend who alerted the police. When police attend their home, Anya's showing obvious signs of injury and she's very upset. She tells them Dean's assaulted her and he's arrested. Mr. Peters tells the jury that as a result of, quote, other things, and as is quite normal in sexual investigations, she was interviewed by police and that interview was video recorded. During that video interview, Anya told police everything that had been done to her. That's the primary evidence, says Mr. Peters, the video. 2 videos, in fact, a second interview having been done to clear up some issues in the first. That, he says, is a summary of the evidence they're going to hear. The judge has already given you a series of directions, the prosecutor says, and told you that evidentially this is how things are done and that you're not to hold it against the defendant. Finally, he tells the jury that the prosecution has to prove both counts on the indictment so that you are sure of the defendant's guilt. If you're not sure, he says, then it is your duty to find the defendant not guilty. How the Crown proves its case, he says, is by putting the evidence before you. Having concluded his opening speech, Mr. Peters turns to the judge, so does the jury. His Honour puts down his pen and tells the jury they're now going to see Anya's video interviews. While you're watching, says the judge, it'll be obvious that the lawyers have a transcript of the evidence. You don't. It would be wrong for you to have your head in a transcript. Just watch. Everyone in the courtroom turns immediately to the court screens in anticipation of Anya's evidence. Several minutes later, we're still waiting. The video won't play. Mr. Peters and the court clerk are stumped. There's much head scratching. Nobody understands why the file won't play. It says it's ready to share and it was working earlier. Court rises so they can sort it out. In other words, the judge and the jury leave the court and maybe get a chance to have a cup of tea, leaving those in the courtroom free to faff and fumble with and express their frustration at the court's IT equipment. It's now 3:15 and the clerk, counsel and another member of court staff who's come to try and help, they're all still flummoxed by the file that won't play. The prosecutor's even got hold of the original DVD recording of the interview and that won't play either. Half an hour later, 3:45, still no joy. It might be the dongles, someone says. They might need an update. The judge, who's just come back into court to check on progress, now agrees to give up on the day. The jury should be sent home until tomorrow, he says. Case resumes at 10:30. There's a sudden kerfuffle at the back of the court. It's Dean. He's complaining, loudly, that the jury was sent out for a few minutes, but that was nearly an hour ago and they haven't come back yet. The judge addresses the still largely empty courtroom. These things happen sometimes, he says. There's no need for any protest from the dock. With that, His Honour gathers up his files and court adjourns until tomorrow. Tuesday morning, we're back in court 2 for the second day of Dean's trial. If yesterday's IT issues have been resolved, we should be starting with Anya's pre-recorded video evidence this morning. I'm going to point out something now, though, that might not be obvious. Anya will have spent all day yesterday nervously waiting to give her evidence. If all had gone to plan, Anya's evidence would have been done and dusted last night. That was certainly something the judge was keen to facilitate, but as in a lot of trials, things did not go to plan. So Anya's back in court today, sitting in the video suite of a court in a neighbouring county, waiting for her ABE video evidence to be played to the jury before she's cross-examined by the defence. Like she was waiting yesterday. I'm also going to point something else out. If you remember, something very similar happened in Tariq's trial too. The prosecutor hit play on Ruby's ABE video and while it played, there wasn't any sound and the jury ended up being sent home early there as well. IT fails and technical issues are a recurring problem in trials. I'd go so far as to say they're a regular occurrence. They cause a lot of delays. As an observer, they interrupt the flow of the evidence and the case that's being presented, but for witnesses who are giving evidence assisted by special measures, so pre-recorded evidence, evidence given remotely, measures that are reliant on audio-visual technology and remote links, for these witnesses, IT fails and technical issues increase the amount of time they spend at court giving or waiting to give their evidence, which cannot but add to the stress and trauma of going to court. In short, they're a big deal. It's almost 11:15 before we're let into court the next morning. If there were legal discussions between counsel and His Honour this morning, we've missed them. The jurors are already in their seats when we enter court, and Mr. Peters is already up on his feet, waiting to start. Anya's video interview comes up on the court screens. On the screen, we see a young woman, Anya, sitting on a sofa. The interviewing officer's in a chair opposite her, with his back to the camera. He does his introductions for the recording and says, "We're here to talk about an incident you've reported. Can you tell me what that is?" "Getting beat up by my boyfriend," says Anya. She's asked about her boyfriend's name, his date of birth. "Where did it happen?" the officer then asks. "At the house," she says. This is the home that she and Dean shared at the time. The house he was eventually arrested in when her friend had called the police. "When did it happen?" asks the officer. "When did it start?" "Yesterday," says Anya, "and the night before that." "Tell me what happened," the officer asks her. "Tell me how it started." Anya begins to tell the officer what happened yesterday and the night before. Now, this video interview with Anya that's being played in court right now, it's almost an hour long, and it's what Mr. Peters' opening speech was based on, so I'm going to summarise it for you. She gives an incredibly comprehensive, very detailed account, not just of the incidents resulting in the 2 sex offence charges, but of the relationship itself. And what she's describing is an almost relentless but definitely escalating cycle of abuse. The cycle typically starts with Dean's apparently unwavering conviction that Anya's cheating on him. He accuses her, he calls her awful names, makes terrifying threats to rape her, to kill her, that he's going to have her shot, he's going to have someone throw acid on her. And then he hits her, or worse. Then there's calm, they talk, they make up, it's okay for a while, a few days maybe, a couple of weeks. But then the cycle starts all over again. He accuses her of cheating. He knows she's cheated, he'll tell her. And each time, the violence gets worse. It's a pattern that started quite quickly, maybe a couple of months into their relationship, and it's culminated in the incidents giving rise to those 3 counts of ABH that Dean pleaded guilty to yesterday morning, which Anya's now describing in her video interview. First, there's the severe beating he gave her in the car a few weeks ago. Remember, this video was recorded a couple of years prior to trial, so when she says a few weeks ago, she means a few weeks prior to the video being made, not a few weeks prior to the trial. So, a few weeks ago, Dean had been away and was coming home. She spent the day making the house look nice, and then she'd taken the car and gone to pick him up. He didn't even kiss me, she says. He just said to get into the car. He was already in a bad mood and he said, "You've cheated on me, who with?" And I said, "I haven't." And he started hitting me. She goes on to describe a prolonged physical assault in the car, hitting, punching, dragging her by the hair, strangulation. He twisted me like a chicken, she's telling the officer. Anya says she was screaming and flailing, trying to fend off the blows that keep coming. The assault came to an end when she managed to escape from the car and she ran into a petrol station, badly beaten, screaming for help. She didn't call the police. She called Dean's dad, and his wife, Dean's stepmum, came and collected Anya from the petrol station. She takes Anya to Dean's dad's house, where she stays for a few hours. She's told them what's happened. Later on, though, Anya doesn't want to go home, back to Dean, so she goes to her friend's house instead and spends the night there. The next morning, she says, Dean picked me up. We talked, we sorted things out. Things were okay, she says. They even went on holiday for a few days. We had a good time, she says. When they got back, Dean started asking her about where she'd been the night of the petrol station incident. He was convinced, again, that she'd cheated on him. He said he'd seen her in someone's car putting her hair up. It never happened, Anya tells the officer. But he was so sure. He was so sure. I just had to go along with it. She's mentioned this a couple of times, that it's easier sometimes to just agree with him, to say, yes, I did that, I'm sorry, than it is to deny his accusations, to try and persuade Dean that what he thinks has happened hasn't in fact happened. Easier in the sense that the situation calms down more quickly if she admits to and apologises for things she hasn't done, rather than trying to deny them. This time, however, going along with Dean's accusations culminates in an extended violent assault spread over 2 days, resulting in the 2nd and 3rd ABH charges that Dean pleaded guilty to yesterday. Having admitted to cheating on him, Anya says, even though in fact she hadn't, Dean was outraged and he beat her. He was hitting me in the face, in the body, wherever he could possibly hit me. Just fists, she says, almost matter-of-factly. No weapons. When I've pushed him off, he's come back at me. That's when he's tried to strangle me. I don't know how long for. I managed to tell him to get his dad on the phone. I felt petrified. I thought he was going to end up fucking killing me. Anya explains that in getting Dean to ring his dad, she was hoping that Dad was going to talk him down, that would bring it to an end, but it didn't. After the call, Dean started up again. A few more hits, she says, and then Dean's told me to go upstairs. Upstairs, in the bedroom, he's told her to undress and to get on all fours. He kicked me, she says, 4 or 5 times, in the arse, my legs, my bits, trying to pinch me, trying to pinch my bits. A quick side note, This, the vaginal pinching, this has been charged as sexual assault. That's count 1 on the indictment, which Dean's denying in the current trial. Back to Anya's evidence. She's on all fours, begging Dean to leave her alone, she says, telling him that she's had enough, but he doesn't stop. When he does eventually stop, he won't let her leave the bedroom. She tells him that she needs a drink of water, but Dean won't let her go downstairs on her own, so they go down together. She tells the officer she was dizzy by now. She thinks she fainted at one point. It was difficult to get back upstairs to bed. Then Dean went to sleep. He fell asleep, she says. I couldn't get to sleep for ages, but I did in the end. Did you think about leaving him when he was asleep? Asks the officer. I've had those thoughts before, she says flatly. I just wanted to sort it out. I didn't want to call the police. I hoped we could sort it out. I have feelings for him, but I can't carry on like this. And she's left him before. Anya isn't a British national. It doesn't matter where she's from originally. What matters is that she doesn't have a British passport. And Anya's telling the officer now that she didn't have a passport at all for a few weeks because Dean had destroyed it. She'd wanted to go home to attend a family wedding. Dean didn't want her to go. He hit me a few times, she says, and he ripped my passport up so I couldn't leave. Eventually, Dean relented and told Anya that she could go home for the wedding after all. He took her to the relevant embassy where she was issued with a temporary passport. Once she'd left, while she was away at the wedding, Anya decided she'd had enough. She wasn't coming back, and she told Dean. This prompted a torrent of threats and abusive messages from Dean, including him sending her a video of the couple having sex, accompanied by a pretty nasty text message. Dean then went on to post that same video on social media, along with a similarly nasty message about Anya. Anyway, she's still at the wedding. She's told him she's not coming back, and Dean's, well, he's not taking it well. He's threatening Anya, and he's threatening to harm himself. Anya capitulates. They talk, they sort things out, and she agrees to come back to the UK, to come back to Dean, where it all starts again. So she's left him before, and leaving Dean doesn't make the abuse stop, it just makes it different. She continues now with telling the officer about the morning after the brutal beating and alleged sexual assault. She woke up, Anya's telling the officer, because Dean was prodding her. Get up, Dean told her. I can't believe you did this. He's raging again. He's saying nasty things about me, she says. What I look like, I'm a liar. I've got no respect for him. I couldn't listen to it anymore. I begged him, please let me off. I'll do anything to make it better. He pushed my head down, she says, and told me he'd show me what I needed to do. He made me do oral sex, his penis in my mouth, making me gag, holding my neck, doing it faster and faster, making me gag, holding my hair, telling me to take it all, slag, take it deep. I threw up on the carpet on the bed, but that was going on for a few minutes. After I threw up, he let me off then. Then he says, I wanted to rape you, and I can't even do that because I love you so much. This, the oral sex, this is the subject of count 2 on the indictment, the rape charge. Anya goes on to describe what happened afterwards, that they'd got dressed and that they went out in the car to get supplies. On the way, Dean stopped at his brother's house and then again at a couple of friends' houses. Every time he stopped, he was showing off her injuries. Dean said to his mate, look at her. He twisted my head and he said, look, that's what cheaters get. And he said, do you want to give her one? And his mate said no. At some point, either the night before or that morning, it isn't clear from Anya's account when, but at some point, Dean had taken her mobile phone off her. This doesn't seem to be a one-off, by the way, Dean taking Anya's phone off her. So Dean's got Anya's phone, and it had been pinging all morning. Her friend had been repeatedly trying to contact her, and the repeated pings were annoying Dean. So while they were still in the car, he gave Anya her phone. She took it and sent her friend a photo of her face and a message saying, I want to see you. With that, the battery on Anya's phone had died. There's some more toing and froing in Anya's account of that morning's events, but the long and the short of it is that it's this friend who contacts the police because she's so concerned about Anya. And it's in response to that phone call that shortly after Anya and Dean get back home, the police arrive at their house and Dean's arrested. That's the end of the video. The screen goes black. Mr. Peters stands up. He informs the judge there's a second video interview that will be played now. It clarifies some issues from the first. It's 11:42. As the second video comes straight up on the screen, we see Anya back in the interview suite with the same officer. He's explaining to Anya that this interview is to deal with some issues that the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, have asked them to talk about. OK, says the officer. In your first interview, you've said Dean forced you to give him oral sex. Is that the case? Yes, says Anya. You seem a bit unsure, the officer observes. Well, because it feels... I've said I don't want to do it, and then I've thrown up, she says. Did you say or do anything to let him know you didn't want to, the officer asks. Yes, I've told him to stop. I've told him to stop, and he's carried on, says Anya. She's asked how long the oral sex went on for. She doesn't know. I didn't watch the clock, she says. She's asked if Dean ejaculated. I don't know what that means, says Anya. Did he come? I don't know. I was sick. That ended it. Anya's asked what the sick was made up of. She doesn't know, but it was reddish, she says. It had blood in it. When she's asked what Dean said to her, she explains she doesn't remember everything word for word now. It's a few months down the road, she says, and I'm trying not to think about it. She was just trying to keep him calm, she explains. She went along with him and did what she was told. Because he'd physically hurt you prior to that, hadn't he, says the officer. Yes. How was your relationship? Good and bad, she sighs. More bad than good. What was bad? She talks about the violence, the threats, that's why she'd left him before, but then Dean would call her and say he'd taken an overdose and so she'd go back. She's asked about violence other than the incidents detailed in the first video, whether he's hit her on other occasions. Yes, she says, he's hit her a few times, but she doesn't remember them all. She's asked whether those incidents left her with injuries. Sometimes, she says. Whether anyone else had seen those injuries. She doesn't think so, she says. He asks about the night of the petrol station incident. When she'd gone to stay at her friend's house, can she remember what she said to her friend? Not word by word, Anya says. He came to the door. I was obviously in a bad way, crying. Please open the door. And when he sees me, he's like, oh, what's he done to you? I cried, but I didn't say much. When I came back in the morning, that's when it all happened. Ugh. The picture on the screen's frozen. There's no audio. It looks like the video's crashed again. Mr. Peters is up, so is the court clerk. We're back to frantic button pushing and head scratching. The judge decides the court will rise for 20 minutes so the problem can be sorted and the jury can get a drink. It's 11:52. It's not 20 minutes. It's never 20 minutes. It's a little after 12:30 when His Honour comes back into court. The jury is still out on their impromptu tea break. The issue is resolved, but there have been some developments that need to be discussed, Mr. Peters tells the judge. Mr. Charles, Dean's defence barrister, then explains that the defendant has raised a number of issues that will need to be dealt with prior to Anya's cross-examination. In other words, he's asking the judge for some time to take instructions from his client before he starts Anya's cross. The judge is also advised that there's an issue with the live link, so Anya's currently being brought to this court for cross-examination, which will be conducted via the court building's own video link. His Honour, who has been doing his utmost to ensure that Anya's evidence, her evidence-in-chief and cross-examination, is heard over the course of a single court day, and he agrees that the remainder of her second ABE video will be played now and that court will then break for lunch. That gives adequate time for Mr. Charles to meet with the defendant, for the complainant Anya to get to court, and for the judge to take care of some matters he needs to deal with. He calls for the jury to be brought back in. It's 12:40 and the video resumes. Remember, this is Anya's second interview with the police. It's an additional interview that the CPS has asked the police to conduct a few months after the first video to clarify some issues. The video starts playing from precisely the spot it had reached before the screen froze an hour ago. where Anya was telling the officer about what she'd told the friend she stayed with the night of the petrol station assault. The officer then moves on to the second incident, the beating that took place a few weeks later, the one that involved sexual as well as physical assaults. "We need to nail down the oral sex part," says the officer. "How did it come about that he was asking you for oral sex?" Anya explains the circumstances again, that he's woken her up, that he was going nuts, she says, that she was trying to appease him, saying she'd do anything. She's asked what he was wearing at the time, what he said to her, what he was doing with his hands. She's asked what he said afterwards. She's asked if it was different to normal, different to consensual sex. "Yes," she says, "it was forced. He could see that I didn't want to do it." How was it different? Because he was putting pressure on her, she says, pressing on her like he was doing it himself, using her. She's asked if there's anything else she remembers, and she says no. With that, the interview ends and the screen goes black. "Thank you," says the judge, and the jury files out for lunch. They've been told to be back for 2:30. Once they're gone, the judge turns to counsel, who are both on their feet. Mr. Charles, of course, is going to be taking instructions from Dean before cross-examination this afternoon. The judge tells counsel to be in court for 2:00 so that any matters arising can be dealt with. Mr. Peters informs the judge that there's a potential Section 41 application, but Mr. Charles quickly says he doesn't believe that there is. Section 41 of the Youth Justice and Criminal Evidence Act 1999 comes into play when the defendant in a sex case wants to adduce evidence of a complainant's sexual behaviour other than at or around the time of the offence charged. It's often referred to as previous sexual history evidence, but that's misleading. It can be evidence of the complainant's sexual behaviour before or after the alleged events. We'll look at Section 41 later in the season because it's a heavily criticised and actually often misunderstood legal provision. For now, though, it suffices to say that the law's starting point is that this kind of evidence is excluded. It's inadmissible. That's the starting point. There are exceptions to the exclusionary rule, but as I say, we'll talk about Section 41 in a later episode. The point here is that evidence of the complainant's sexual behaviour cannot be admitted without the leave of the court. In other words, without a ruling from the judge following an application by the defence to adduce it. So Mr. Peters has flagged up to the judge that there might be a Section 41 application that'll need to be heard this afternoon prior to Anya's cross-examination. Mr. Charles, however, disagrees. No, he's saying, no sexual history evidence, no application required. Now, I'm going to be totally upfront about this. I was distracted by something at this point, I don't know what. But courtroom observations require constant vigilance, or you might miss something that later turns out to be crucial, and I think this is one of those moments. So I was distracted, and the scribbled note to self in my field notes simply says, I wasn't paying attention, but I think the judge just said, "All right, you're experienced counsel. I trust you, ? Whatever the judge did actually say, whether it was those words exactly or just something along those lines, 1, it's going to be important later, and 2, it startled me out of whatever was distracting me at the time. In any event, I am paying attention when Mr. Peters moves on to explain the issue with the video link he'd mentioned to the judge earlier. He's telling the judge now that, as is required, he'd had a conversation with Anya over the video link she's supposed to be being cross-examined on. It did not go well re quality of sound, he says. There's a time delay between questions and answers. It's simply not good enough for giving evidence. It's not fair on the prosecution or defence to conduct his cross-examination this way. And her English is very good. In the circumstances we're going to have her here, we may do cross-examination over the court link or behind court screens. Anya, then, who spent all day yesterday in a court in a different city waiting to be cross-examined, and who spent this morning waiting again, is now being driven to another court, this court, Court 2, because there's a problem with the quality of the court's audio-visual technology. Court rises. It's not 2:30 when court resumes, it's 2:45 when we're let back into Court 2. and there's another kerfuffle at the back of the court. It's Dean again. Because of continuing audio difficulties, Anya's cross-examination isn't going to be conducted via video link now at all. She's going to be physically present in court, but she's going to be behind a screen. So, like we saw the complainants in Tariq and Jerome's trials, in court but screened. Everyone who needs to see the witness will be able to see her, the jury, the judge and counsel, and Anya will be able to see them. But the public, although to be fair, apart from you and I, there isn't anyone else here, they can't see Anya. And crucially, neither can the defendant. Dean can't see Anya while she's cross-examined, and Anya won't have to can't see Dean. And that's what the kerfuffle's about. When a witness is going to be testifying with the assistance of a screen, it's standard practice for the court to be emptied while that witness is brought in, for the defendant and the public to leave the court momentarily while she's settled into the witness box behind the screen, which, if you think about it, makes complete sense. There's not much point screening Anya off if she's going to be paraded through the court anyway on her way to and from the witness box. So the kerfuffle is Dean, who's refusing to leave the dock. He won't go and is calling and gesturing to Mr. Charles, his defence barrister. The judge is annoyed. Dean's disrupted proceedings a few times already, usually by hissing and furiously waving bits of paper, notes he wants passing to his barrister. But he can pick his moments, and he's not particularly quiet about it. That said, so far the jury have been so engrossed in Anya's pre-recorded evidence that they don't really seem to have noticed the defendant carrying on every now and again. But the judge has, and he's losing patience now. Mr. Charles says, look, it might speed things up if I talk to him in case he wants to give instructions, but the judge isn't persuaded. We can't have the defendant disrupting the court simply because he's unhappy about something or other. I think, says Mr. Charles, that he's mainly unhappy with what he thinks is my attitude towards him. The judge gives Mr. Charles permission to speak briefly with Dean. Yes, I can hear them. And while I've anonymised this case as thoroughly as I possibly can, and while it's a conversation that took place in open court, it's still privileged. So I'm not going to tell you what I've just heard. What I am going to say, though, is that it seems reasonable to conclude that Mr. Charles and Dean have a somewhat strained professional relationship. I think Dean is a challenging client. Once he's finished arguing with his barrister, Dean finally agrees to leave the courtroom. Anya's brought in. We haven't had to leave the court while this happens because we can't see her from where we are. She's come in through an entrance out of our line of sight. She's got an interpreter with her, and Anya and the interpreter are now both behind the screen in the witness box. Once the defendant's back in the dock, Anya and her interpreter are both sworn in. It's 14:58, and Anya's cross-examination is about to begin. OK, so I'm not one for dramatic cliffhangers, especially in this podcast, but we're nearly an hour into this episode and Anya's cross-examination demands careful and considered treatment. We are not squeezing it into the final section of an already intense couple of days in court. Her testimony and Mr. Charles's approach, they deserve time and space to breathe. So we're going to pause Dean's trial right here. Join me in episode 6 where we'll cover Anya's cross-examination properly, carefully, respectfully and thoroughly. Before you go, do you have any questions about what we've covered so far? Any comments, observations or even challenges you want to raise? Drop me a line at host@criminaljusticeinaction.com. I'd love to hear from you and your questions might feature in future bonus episodes. That's host@criminaljusticeinaction.com. If you've been affected by any of the issues raised in this episode, please visit our website criminaljusticeinaction.com for information about help and support. Criminal Justice in Action is a Scrutiny Media production, researched, written and presented by Dr. Candida Saunders, edited and produced by Candida Saunders and Gary Saunders, music by Elionis Manova.